Hi everyone, it's Dr. Joe here with our second classroom session. I hope this morning's on ice session went well for you today and that you came to the rink mentally prepared, ready to give 100% effort and learn and challenge yourself on the ice this morning. So today we are going to continue with our mental skills training. And, I really like this statement here. With a strong body and a healthy mind, the possibilities are endless. So again, this is the primary goal of this week at camp is to not only work on your physical abilities via on ice drills, on ice skills and technique, but also talk about other ways that we can strengthen our bodies. So with nutrition, proper sleep habits, are really going to help you develop that strong body. And then, of course, the things that we are doing in class with the sports psychology is going to help you with the healthy mind. So we're going to move forward today talking about our first skill or our sports psychology tool. So, as I alluded to yesterday, throughout this week, we'll be developing your own mental toolbox in which you can draw upon in your hockey performance as a hockey player and use these different sports psych skills that you're going to be introduced to this week. So, the first sports psych skill or sports psych tool that we are going to be working on is managing self talk. And in my experience working with athletes, this is the most critical and crucial component of becoming mentally tough is the talk that you say to yourself either in your own mind quietly or also verbally, right? When you do say some things perhaps on the ice that are verbalized, but also it is much about our thought process here in terms of the thoughts that we have in our minds here. So here are just some quotes that I really like when it comes to thinking about the importance of understanding our self-talk. So this first quote here. When you give the image of negativity and frustration, you are giving the opponent the advantage. Our mind and our bodies are connected. And what you think in your head does come across in the way that you carry yourself. So if you've ever seen any athletes shake their head no or hang their shoulders down low, that's giving me, from a sports psych perspective, indication that there's negative self-talk going on there. So if we are able to work on our self-talk, we can reduce the possibility of us giving that negative image there, okay? So if we are carrying ourselves in a positive light in our minds, that is also going to come across physically in terms of what other people see of you. Some other quotes that I really like: your strongest muscle and your worst enemy is your mind. Train it well. So this is where we have to come back to what I mentioned yesterday about the importance of becoming our own inner coach and our own inner cheerleader rather than our own critic, right? So again here, this quote: make sure your worst enemy is not living between your own two ears. Your thoughts are in your control. You are the only one that has full control over your own thoughts. I can be here to assist you in helping you change those negative self-talk statements to something more positive, but this is within your control. So, my hope is that you will step up, take the accountability here in terms of understanding that, okay, I have been introduced to the sports psych tool of managing my self-talk. I now need to practice it, right? So again, a reminder in terms of practicing our psych skills, 2 times a day, 10 minutes each session. So before we can talk about how we go about managing our self-talk, it would be important to define what self-talk is, okay? So self-talk includes all of the things we say to ourselves out loud and in our heads. So, what do I mean when we say, well, I'm talking to myself out loud? Yeah, that does happen when, we score a goal and we say to ourselves, come on, you say that out loud. That's essentially self-talk. But most of the time, when we're talking about self-talk from a sports psych perspective, are the things that we say in our heads. It does include positive and negative statements. We, from a sports psych perspective, are going to work more on the negative self-talk. We absolutely want to encourage the use of positive self-talk and reinforce the use of that. But for a lot of athletes, again, they struggle with the negative self-talk statements they are saying in their head. And so that's really what this presentation, this lecture is going to focus on, is changing our negative self-talk statements to positive self-talk statements. What our research shows us in the world of sports psych is that our ability to perform depends on our thoughts and how we talk to ourselves. What we see with athletes when we do research with them related to self-talk is that the use of positive self-talk helps motivate athletes and helps build confidence. So if you look at some of the phrases on this graphic here, so stay strong, make it work. Those are positive self-talk statements that I often refer to as our power phrases. These types of power phrases are going to help motivate you to persist in the face of a failure experience, or to persist in the face of some sort of challenging obstacle that you may be presented with this week, right? So if you are learning a new skill, or the coaches are having you practice something to break maybe a bad habit and change, again, that dominant response to something that is going to benefit you in the long term, using these power phrases can help motivate you and build your self-confidence. Continually repeating yourself to make it work. Hold on. Stay strong. So, as we move forward today, I really want you to be thinking about what power phrases are best for you. If you think of any of our athletic apparel companies, like Nike, they have a power phrase that they use that is probably very motivating for a lot of athletes who wear their apparel, right? Just do it. Okay, so we see that plays out in terms of the importance of engaging in positive self-talk, because our ability to perform absolutely enhances when and improves when we use positive self-talk statements. So when does negative self-talk tend to happen? There's going to be a variety of different bullet points that we go through. And I want you, as we're going through this, maybe in your notebooks, to star or write down the bullet points that happen to you in terms of when you use negative self-talk statements. And again, this is drawing from the literature that we see when we do research with negative self-talk. Most often, athletes engage in negative self-talk statements when we focus on either the past or the present. So here's an example of what happens when we focus on the past. I can't believe I missed that open net shot. So I can't, right? I cannot believe. You continue to dwell on that, right? And so that does not allow us to move forward and focus on the task at hand, because our thoughts are so wrapped up in something that happened in the past. Okay? We cannot change the past. So we need to accept that, yes, I missed that open net shot, but there's opportunity in the future. I can't dwell on that. Something else we tend to focus on is something that is outside of our control in terms of the future. We only have control over things that are happening in the present. So we want to stay away from focusing on something that's going to happen in the future. So perhaps an example of this would be, your opponent is the fastest skater on the team. I won't be able to slow him down, right? It's negative self-talk, telling yourself you're not able to do something, thinking about the future. You're not going to be able to stop him in the first period, the second period, the third period. Take each period, one period at a time, or perhaps one line shift, one at a time. Break it down so that you're not wrapped up in those negative thoughts of focusing on something that's going to happen in the future. Often, and perhaps most relevant to you all this week, is that you may be focusing on our weaknesses. This is a lot of times when we have negative self-talk happening, is when instead of focusing on our strengths, we focus on our weaknesses. So perhaps a drill you're doing at camp this week or in practice in general with your own teams is you're working on your backward skating, right? So I'm the slowest one at backward skating. You're making that comparison to other people. That negative self-talk, your mind is going to be occupied by that negative self-talk rather than focusing on the improvement there, okay? So we need to get away from that, and we will talk about how to change that thought process. But there's no need to focus on that weakness. Really look at it in a more positive way and say, this is an area of improvement. I have the capability to work on this area of improvement, but don't worry so much about being the slowest one. Worry more about mastering this particular skill. We also tend to engage in negative self-talk when we focus only on winning. Hockey is the opportunity, especially in practices, in camp, to work on the process and not focus on the outcome. So we put a lot of pressure on ourselves if we focus only on winning and say something that, if we don't win this game, we are failures. We kind of make that a catastrophe, right? Or we make that generalized assumption that if we don't win this one particular game, we are failures. And when you really think about that statement, your success as a hockey player should not be wrapped up in just one game, right? It should be over the course of the season here. So, what improvements have I made, has our team made throughout the course of the season that allows us to engage in more positive self-talk rather than focusing on just one particular outcome in terms of that win-loss record. We also tend to engage in negative self-talk when we focus on things that you cannot control. So a lot of times when things aren't going our way in a game, we often blame the refs, okay? And there are going to be times where the refs are making bad calls, but that's outside of your control. There's nothing that you can do about the calls that the refs are making. So what we ask you to do is take your focus and your concentration away from the calls that the refs are making. Do not focus on the referees at all and do what you have in your control. And doing what is in your control are your behaviors, the thoughts that you engage in, and controlling your emotions in reaction to those blown calls, whatever they may be, okay? So again, getting away from focusing on the things that you cannot control and really only focusing your attention and your thoughts on things that you can control, which essentially is your play, your thoughts, and your emotional reactions. When we demand perfection, we also tend to set very high expectations for ourselves and sometimes unrealistic expectations that we cannot achieve. And when we set those unrealistic expectations, we engage in a lot of negative self-talk. So perhaps, we have this demand for perfection in the form of, I must be the best player on the team. If I don't play well, we will certainly lose this game, okay? You're putting 100% of the pressure on yourself. Hockey is a team sport, right? So if you demand perfection from yourself, we often set ourselves up for failure because we cannot be perfect. We can give 100% effort. So instead of demanding perfection, what I would encourage you to do is to demand 100% effort each and every time you step onto the ice. Each and every time you do anything related to your hockey career is demand 100% effort, whatever that may be for you individually. So what I want you to do now is break up into small groups. So I'm going to go through this, what I want you to do in small groups, and the coaches in the room can help facilitate this group work here, okay? So I want you to be thinking about hockey and anything that relates to your hockey. You can think about practices, you can think about camp, you can think about a game situation, when you're in the locker room, when you're on the bench, whatever sort of comes to mind in terms of your self-talk. Okay? So what I would like you to do is break up into groups of 3 and thinking about your own hockey performance, hockey experiences. I want you to share in your groups what positive self-talk statements do you say to yourself? So be able to identify some positive self-talk statements you do say to yourself. When do you tend to engage in positive self-talk? Is it when you are winning? Is it when you feel confident? Do you tend to have more positive self-talk statements in practice versus a game situation? Okay, so whatever comes to mind in terms of the situations in which you find yourself engaging in positive self-talk. And then I want you to also do the same with negative self-talk. So what negative self-talk statements do you say to yourself? And then again, the situation there. When do you have those negative self-talk statements? So the coaches in the room can help facilitate this group work, stop the presentation for a couple minutes, and then have you break up into those groups, share your responses to these questions, and then when I come back this afternoon for the question and answer session, we can kind of talk our way through these in terms of your responses to this. All right, so hopefully you were able to identify your positive self-talk statements and your negative self-talk statements in the small group work activity. What I want to do now is just go through some examples of what self-talk sounds like after a disappointing game, both from a negative perspective and a positive perspective. So perhaps a negative self-talk statement you may say to yourself after a disappointing game. I screwed up. I didn't play well. I'm not as good as so-and-so. This kind of self-talk does not put you at your best, right? It puts you down. Right here, we're being our own worst critic. We're being our own inner enemy here, is by focusing on perhaps all the negative things that happened without ever identifying any positive from that game situation. What a more positive self-talk statement would look like after a disappointing game would be, okay, acknowledging that, yeah, maybe I didn't play so well, but then telling yourself, saying to yourself, I know that I can play better than what I did today, and I will apply myself to do that at the next game. Or another example, today was a good learning experience for me, and now I'm moving on. So you can sit there and think, well, what was good about this game in terms of what did I learn? Okay? Because if you've learned something, that's now giving you information that you can improve upon in the next game, or that you can be working on in practice so that you can do better in the next game that you play. So this kind of talk, this more positive self-talk, leaves you feeling more revived, ready to try again, but not only just try again, but also being able to try harder and perhaps try better. Again, reminding yourself that I need and I demand 100% effort. Another example of negative self-talk. How could I have been so stupid as to miss that goal? Because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not good at anything. I'm so dumb. These may be similar thoughts that you have had in your mind, or perhaps have even said out loud after a disappointing game. You likely aren't going to feel so good about yourself when you're contemplating this answer, right? How could I have been so stupid as to miss that goal? Well, it's because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not good at anything. I'm so dumb. If you have that negative self-talk statement, chances are you're not going to really feel good about yourself as a hockey player. So instead, reframing these types of questions to again focus on the learning process. Well, yeah, I missed that goal, but what did I learn from all of this? When you ask yourself that question, your brain is likely going to come up with something similar to these responses. I need to work on hitting the net in practice. I need to relax when I have the puck in front of the opponent's net. This type of self-talk leaves you feeling empowered rather than feeling discouraged, right? So in this previous negative self-talk statement, I'm so dumb, that's going to leave you feeling very discouraged. I need to relax when I have the puck in front of the opponent. Okay, so that's telling you something that you can work on, is working on some of our mental skills in terms of how do I relax myself, right? So working on things like progressive muscle relaxation, taking a deep breath when you have the puck in front of an opponent's net. That is going to tell you that that is a skill that you need to practice and improve upon for the next time you're in that particular situation. So how do we stop negative self-talk? The first activity that you all must be doing is becoming aware of the statements you say to yourself, whether they be positive or negative, but you need to start becoming aware of the statements that you say to yourself during practice, during games. So this needs to be a conscious effort on your part in camp this week, as well as beyond camp, in terms of identifying the statements that you consistently say to yourself. So some examples: I can't believe I missed that shot on goal. Or for goalies, I can't believe I gave up that goal. Okay, so you need to start really being mindful of the conversations you're having with yourself, or that internal dialogue that's going on in your mind, not only in games, but also in practices, in the locker room, as you're getting ready to come to the rink. All of those situations related to hockey, you need to start becoming aware of the self-talk statements you say to yourself. Once we have become aware of the statements that we say to ourselves, what I'm encouraging you to do is stop that negative self-talk statement with some sort of cue word or a trigger. Okay, so how are you going to stop these negative self-talk statements? Perhaps it is saying to yourself out loud. I'm not saying you have to shout it out loud. If you want to, go for it. More power to you. But maybe you quietly whisper to yourself, stop. Or maybe you just say it to yourself in your mind. But you need to be able to acknowledge, oh, I'm having this negative self-talk statement. I've just told myself, I can't believe I gave up that goal. You need to tell yourself, stop. Okay? For some other athletes who are more visual athletes, they may want to visualize a red stop sign or a red stop light. Or perhaps if you're someone that likes doing more of a behavior, you can slap your glove against your thigh. That is what's going to help you tell yourself, I need to stop engaging in this cycle of negative self-talk statements. So you need to be thinking about a cue word or some sort of trigger that is going to help you stop from engaging in that negative self-talk. Then what we are going to do is replace the negative with something that is positive. So you can see here, these are some examples. So instead of saying impossible, this is going to be an impossible feat. This is possible. Instead of it being unattainable, it is attainable. So there's no room for negativity in your mind. Some examples in terms of saying, okay, I can't believe I missed that shot on goal. You say to yourself, stop. The next statement that you say to yourself after saying stop is, I got this. I'll get it next time. Or perhaps you repeat to yourself, patience, patience, patience. Whatever sort of your positive statement can be, or that power phrase, be ready to identify that positive self-talk statement that you are going to replace after having that negative self-talk. And again, just like our physical skills, we need to practice our mental skills. We need to practice our self-talk statements. So again, 10 minutes twice a day working on our self-talk statements, I would encourage you to do. so that you can really change your thought process from being that Eeyore, right? Always having that negative talk going in our heads, and being someone more like Tigger, right? Being very energized and positive. So here's some additional ways to work on your self-talk. The first is something that when I'm working with individual athletes, I try out with all of my athletes, is to do some journal writing. So journal writing can happen after every practice, after every game. Really reflecting on the thought process or the thoughts that you have in your mind. Write down what you were thinking. Write down when you thought it. So I had this positive self-talk statement at this particular moment. I had this negative self-talk statement at this particular moment. Perhaps you started engaging in negative self-talk when a coach started yelling at you. Guess what? A coach is going to yell at you from time to time. That is within their realm of responsibilities and what they're there for, okay? So they may be a critic to you, but this is why the positive self-talk is so very important, that you become your inner coach and that you become your inner cheerleader there, okay? So write down also how those positive self-talk statements and especially the negative self-talk statements affected your performance. So again, this week, we're going to be asking you to change your dominant response for the better. That's going to be very frustrating. So if you're engaging in a lot of negative self-talk statements, have you given up? Is that how it's affecting your performance? Have you just told yourself, I'm never going to be able to master this particular skill, so I'm just not going to try anymore? Well, that's going to affect our performance in a negative light. This image I really like here, the street sign. As you can see, negativity is bringing us backwards. Positivity is going to be what moves us forward. So perhaps that's something to consider, is that the more positive self-talk I engage in, I'm going to continue to move forward. Where you're going to be stuck or actually take a few steps back when we engage in that negativity. Okay? So journal writing. Consider getting a small journal, a small notebook, and writing down your responses about, to these particular questions after each practice, after each game. That can be part of the 10 minutes twice a day that you spend on, is just doing that journal writing. Continue to work on the thought stoppage. So as soon as a negative thought enters your mind, you fight back immediately by saying no. Make that very assertive in terms of no, okay? And come back with your power phrase. So in your journal writing, you may want to write out a couple of different power phrases that you have for yourself. For me personally, my power phrase is I've got this. I often use power phrases as my passwords on the computer. For anything that I need a password for, I use my power phrase just as a constant reminder of engaging in positive self-talk. Do work. That's another one I often use myself and actually have in the past used as a password. It is helping me engage in that positive self-talk each and every time I have to enter a password for my email or anything else on the computer. Another idea I have in terms of another way to work on your self-talk is something that you can do off of the ice. This will be very challenging to do on the ice because you're wearing your gloves. But off of the ice, again, part of that 10 minutes twice a day is wearing a rubber band around your wrist and snapping it every time negativity enters your mind. Okay? Then again, you can use that in combination with our thought stoppage, and that you say to yourself, I can't do this. You snap that rubber band and you say, no, use that positive self-talk statement. I've got this. I can do this, right? Using that positive self-talk is going to help build your confidence and motivate you to try harder, to do better, give 100% effort. Lastly, this is a little bit more challenging, but if you feel you've got a good sense of working on the thought stoppage, I would encourage you to spend a little bit more time thinking about the limitations you put on yourself via the comments you make. And instead, change those comments and frame them as questions. So if, say, we're goalies, an example of a self-limiting comment would be, I can't stop this guy's shot, right? If this is happening in camp or perhaps in a practice situation, I'm not going to be able to stop this guy's shot, right? That's very definitive. Instead, I challenge you to pose a question to yourself and say, how will I stop this shot? Right? It's a question that you have to give an answer to. So it's going to focus on the process there. How will I stop this shot? You come up with a response to it, focusing on the process in which you're going to engage in terms of giving 100% effort to stop that shot. Okay. So I'm going to leave you with some homework. So what I want you to do in this afternoon sessions on ice, as well as in tomorrow morning session, is I want you to attend to your self-talk. If you decide that journal writing is for you, you may write these things down. But at the very least, I want you to try to remember the statements you say to yourself when in the morning you are leaving for the ice den, when you get to the ice den and you're getting ready to get on the ice, what self-talk statements, what is the internal dialogue that's going on in your mind? What is the internal dialogue on the ice when you are working on your skill set, on drills, different techniques? Positive self-talk and negative self-talk included. Identify the statements that you're saying to yourself in your head, as well as when you are leaving the ice. Because again, oftentimes after we have finished the practice and it hasn't gone as well as we would have liked, that's when we engage in a lot of negative self-talk. But through practice of our self-talk, what we can do is say, hey, this wasn't a great practice, or this wasn't a great on-ice session, but this is what I improved upon, or this is what I did learn from this particular session. So I want you to really be thinking about and attending to your self-talk statements that you are doing between this afternoon and tomorrow morning session, and then we will talk about it as a larger group. Okay? So just to leave you on this quote here, change your thoughts and you change your world. Right? It's a quote that really speaks to the importance of engaging in positive self-talk and how the practice of positive self-talk can absolutely change our performance as hockey players, both on and off the ice.